Hi guys, Swordmaster here. Today in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to move between boards in your game. So up to this point everything we've done is on a single board, and you might be wondering, how do I expand my game world and make it possible for my character to move between, say, one room to another room. So what I've done here is I've set up two kind of dummy rooms that I'm going to use here for this tutorial that will connect to the door on the left and the door on the right. So in the first room I have a red tile, and what we're going to learn how to do is how can we send the player from this door to that red tile. And also on the room on the right we'll learn how to send the player to another room onto this green tile. So there's a few things that we need to turn on first to get an idea of what we need to do. So when sending a character from one room to another, we need to know where in that room we want to send them to. And for that we need to know the coordinates of the tile or point that we want to send them. So to do that we need to turn on first the view. If you go to view and you go to show coordinates, straight away you'll see that the board that I have selected will have the coordinates drawn on it. And then if you kind of hover over the other boards, the coordinates will also be drawn on those too. And straight away, if I zoom in a little bit on this board and scroll to the red tile, I'll be able to get the coordinates of this tile, which I can see are 10 and 7. So what is that? Well, the coordinates are broken down into an X and Y component. And the 10 tells me that the tile is at X position 10 and Y position 7. Now in RPG Wizard, 0, 0 is at the top left corner of the board. This is just to do with the way computer graphics work. Typically computers draw from the top left and not from the bottom left that you would have in a normal graph. That's another topic in itself. So basically all you need to know is that the top left corner is where tile 0, 0 is, and along the top the width is the top axis, and then the Y goes from the top left down to the bottom left. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the coordinate system now. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to the draw area vector tool. So basically what we need to do is we need to define an event on the board, and you can do that using a particular type of vector. So you can see the red vectors that I have here. These are collision vectors. There is another type of vector that I'm going to draw now, and I'm going to turn on snap to grid for this. So when you draw a vector, by default it's always a collision one, but you can change the type. So I've drawn a vector in front of this door here, and now I'm going to change that type of vector by selecting it with right click, and I'm going to go over to the properties tab, and I'm going to select vector type passable. Now what this means, it means that I can pass through this vector, and straight away you'll see that it is yellow. And what you can do with passable vectors is you can actually configure an event that will trigger on them. So if you go back to the properties tab, you'll see an event section. There are two types. There's an overlap or a key press, and for this one we're going to use overlap. And what overlap means is that when the character overlaps with this triggerable vector or passable vector, we can fire off an event, and in this case our event is going to be to send the player to another board. So to do that, go back to the properties and then go to configure event program, and you'll be presented with this small dialog which will ask you what kind of configuration you want to give this event. So by default it will come up with this custom event type, and what a custom event is it's any program that you want to trigger. We're going to ignore that type, and what I want you to do is go to event type and then select board link, and then straight away when you switch to board link you'll see a different set of options available, and you'll see board, which is the board that you want to send the character to, the X position, the Y position that you want to send it to, and then another thing is the layer position that you want to send the character to. By default that's layer 1, but the layers in the RPG Wizard start from layer 0. So in the case of our board, we only have one layer, and that layer is actually layer 0. On the other board, we have 2 layers, so that would be layer 0 and layer 1. So if I go back here and I configure that event, and I set it to board link, and my board is called demo_1. Now you can create these boards yourselves. It's very, very simple. I've just created a very simple board. So I'm actually just going to go and select demo_1 board. And then I'm going to set the X position, which is already set 10, and I'm going to set the Y position to 7, and then I'm going to set the layer position to 0. And then I'm going to click OK. And it's going to ask me to generate this event, and it's going to say, are you sure this will replace any previously auto-generated events? And there's no auto-generated event associated yet here, so I'm just going to click yes. And if I click on configure again, you'll see that it's saved my config. It's a board link and it's sent, it's still got the config, and you can update this as well and send the player to somewhere else. You can even send the player back to the same board that they're currently on, just to a different position. So if you have like a door that goes to another part of the board, you could potentially send the character to that other part of the board. Now I'm going to save that board. So basically what that does is that event gets generated as an auto-generated program, and it lives in your programs folder. You'll never have to edit that program directly though. So that's the first board. Now I'm going to show you what that does. So I'm going to walk into that door now, and hopefully it's actually going to send me to that board. And it did. Pretty much the moment I touched that event, I got sent there straight away. So the player literally just needs to touch any of the edges here. So in my case, that was pretty close. Pretty well. I didn't even touch the door, and I got sent to it. So that's not great, but I'll show you how you can improve that by drawing it on the second door here. And what we'll do is we won't use the snap to grid. So you'll notice when I played that, and I just touch that anywhere near that door, and I get sent straight there. But there's actually no way for me to go back. So if I try to go back, nothing happens. Now to go back, what you need to do is you actually need to create a link back. So before I do that, I'm just going to delete this collision vector that I have here, because it would otherwise interfere with the link back. So I'm going to go back to demo_1 board, which is the one with the red tile, and I'm going to draw another vector, but this time I'm going to draw it in a freehand. So I'm zoomed in a bit because I don't want to trigger this event when I'm like really far away. So I'm just going to turn off snap to grid in this case. And I've zoomed in, so I'm going to draw a smaller area that I need to come into contact with. And yep, okay, that will do. And I'm going to follow the same steps. I'm going to click on it, right click, and then I'm going to go down to select the type, set it to passable, leave it as overlap, and then configure it. Now before I do that, I actually need to know the coordinate that I'm going to send the player to. So I'm going to turn coordinates back on for a second. And I can see that one of the coordinates I might want to send the character to. Now you can actually use half coordinates. So you could say like 2.5x 4y. So if you want the character to appear just in between these two tiles, you can do that. And I'll do that here just to show that. So I'm going to send the character to 2.5x and 4y. So I'm just going to set the board link type, set it to board link, set it to the demo board, set the X to 2.5 and then 4. And now I need to set the layer to layer 0. This board has 2 layers, but the layer I want to send the character to is layer 0. So then I'll click OK, and I'll click yes, and I'm going to save, and I'll click play. And then now if I try to go back, I got sent back. So I go, and I've now linked it. So I'm just going to repeat that same process over here for the other board. But I'm actually not going to draw this huge area around the door. I'm actually going to create a much smaller area that I need to come into contact with. So let's draw the... You can also draw this with the freehand vector tool as well. So we won't do that here because you typically don't want to use the freehand vector tool for something like this. You can if you want, but with the freehand vector tool, you kind of have to like join up all the sides manually, which makes it more difficult to make a perfectly square or rectangular shape. So I'm going to zoom in. Now for this, I have the snap to grid turned off. So I'm going to draw a smaller area just in front of the door that I need to come in contact with. And now I'm going to turn coordinates back on. I'm going to zoom in and find out, it's kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in a bit and I can see that the character needs to go to 3, 7 on this board. I'll go back to this board, right click, set it to passable, configure the event, set it to board link, demo 2 board, and it was coordinates 3, 7, and 0. I click OK. Now I'm going to play that again, and I will be sent to demo board 2. And you'll see that I don't have to come anywhere near as close. Or it won't trigger. I have to go closer, to the door for it to trigger. Oh, it didn't work in that case. I wonder what I've done wrong. So I'm going to take a look at the character a little bit here. I'm going to see how big his collision box is. So if you go and open your character up and then you click on any of the animations, I can see that the character's collision box is actually very large. So basically what that means is all I need to do, well, that's actually his activation box that is very large in this case. So I've opened the character and I'm looking back and I can see that this yellow bounding box around the character, which is used to trigger these kind of events, is far too large in my case. So I'm going to actually go down here to the properties. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. So it's currently 60 high, which is way too high. So I'm going to set that to more like 20. You'll see that it's not really offset. I'll actually increase it to 30, and I'm going to decrease that by half, a bit more. Yeah, that's much smaller. So just to reiterate that there is an activation vector around the character, and if that's turned on, any box that it comes into contact with will trigger that event if it's set to be an overlap. So now it won't trigger until I got much closer in that case. And now the other door as well should also require me to move a little bit closer. See, it's not triggering anywhere near as close as what it was. So another thing you can do with these board events is you can change how they have been triggered. So at the minute, they're triggered the moment I walk into them, but I can also say that the player won't be sent to the other board until they press a key. So to trigger to simulate the action of opening a door in your game, you could say the player can't pass this door until they press a certain key. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the door events, the send to board event. So in this case, I'm picking the one on the far right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the event type. So I'm going to change it to a key press event. And when I do this, it's going to kind of reset this whole event. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to select what key I want to use. So you get a choice of any key on the keyboard, basically. In my case, I'm going to pick E because I think E is a sensible key to use for this. And then I'm going to go back down. I'm going to reconfigure the event and say that I actually want it to send to that board again, set the coordinates 3, 7, and 0, and then I click OK, and it's gonna tell me previously generated events will be replaced, and I'm going to click save. And now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk up to that door again, and you'll see that when I walk up to it, nothing will happen. But as long as I'm close to the door, something will happen. So I'm going to press E away from the door. You'll see nothing is happening. And if I go close to the door, I press E, I get sent to the other board. So that's a way that you can actually trigger kind of an event based on a key to send the player to somewhere else. And that pretty much covers everything there is to do with board link events. In a future tutorial, I'm going to kind of revisit this whole eventing and show you how you can trigger custom code and programs using these event vectors. But that's it for today.